Hello. So real quick, just want to talk about the situation we're all finding ourselves in right now, and that is, the coronavirus pandemic. So there's an issue I want to address here, and let's say we got a person who walks up to his computer, goes on Google, and this guy, he wants to learn more about the virus, because that's what people do. They want to know everything about this shitstorm that literally everyone, except for the three people on the ISS, are currently facing right now. They want to know if it's going to get better, or they want to know if it's going to get worse. So let's say this guy here, he starts to type coronavirus, mutation, more deadly, question mark, and he's suddenly greeted by this barrage of news articles about more dangerous strains of this virus. It's gonna grow fangs and wings and mortality is gonna increase tenfold or some shit like that. In actuality, if you bother reading these articles, they're gonna admit, but we actually don't have any justification or basis for that at all. Yeah, you see, now the problem is, I guarantee what's gonna happen more than half of the times is a person, they're gonna read the headlines and maybe the first paragraph, and that's it. That's it. So what information are they gonna leave with now? Obviously, the one that's written in the very big text on the title of the article. Now, this is misinformation, whether intentional or not, but I bet you all these journalists, they just do it to capitalize on those clicks with that juicy title. The truth is, it is very unlikely, so much so that it's safe to say that it's impossible for a mutation event to result in any significant change whatsoever. And just because a lot of misinformation seems to be spreading around, it seems appropriate to have some valid background on what it actually means for a virus to mutate. You see, viruses are special. They are real champs when it comes to mutation, first place among all other organisms, and there's many reasons to explain why that is so. They're small, very small, and it gives them the ability to replicate in great quantity and speed. To elaborate on that further, that's because the small size of these things make it very easy to replicate, so much so that it happens like really quickly. Also, viruses don't have genetic repair mechanisms, which means there's more chances for a mutation to happen. Now, I should say for coronaviruses in particular, it is a special case because it actually does have a genetic repair mechanism. But my lesson here is like really concerning about the general case, so don't worry about that extra bit of info. What we have in the end is a factory with no quality control that is working at an abnormally high speed. It would not be wrong to assume that most of the output have mistakes in them. To move away from that analogy, if a virus infects and kills a cell, the viral copies that are generated will be slightly different from the original, and this happens every time. Fun fact, this means that when there is a genome of a virus and it gets put into a database, it does not correspond to one virus in particular, but it is rather the average sequence of the virus when it is extracted from a patient. And that's because like you're collecting that info from basically a soup of viruses that, as we said earlier, are all slightly different from one another. So what are the implications of a virus mutating? Let's say it infects a cell, comes out, all the different copies, all distinct from one another. Oh, but wait, look, it's antibodies, and they start recognizing the virus and attaching themselves onto it. But the key point is, like we said, some of these viruses are genetically distinct. When the viruses get lucky, they hit a jackpot in terms of the pattern in their sequence, such that it is different enough from the original that the antibodies bind less effectively to these lucky viruses, and that gives it time to go ahead and infect other cells, and the process repeats. That is why some infections can last for a really long time. So these mutations, they give the viruses an edge in the infection cycle. Because like if you think about bacteria and parasites, these things are much bigger. They don't make mistakes in replications as often as viruses do. But to compensate for that, they do have other mechanisms. Because they're big, they have like the capabilities and the functionality to evade the immune system through different methods that don't require mutations. But viruses, these things are very small. They don't have a lot in their toolbox, so the least that they can do is like shift and change their shape every once in a while so that it gets difficult to attack them. Now, another reason why a virus mutates is because it gives it the ability to transmit itself to a different host. Let's say you're really mad at a particular individual, so you cough on them and you say, "Ha, look who's got a 3% chance to die by the end of next week." So, what happens at the microscopic scale during that social interaction? You cough and droplets land on this poor guy's face. Within the droplet, you got maybe 100, maybe 1,000 different viruses, and again, have to remind you that they're all distinct. Come with their own flavors if you want to imagine. Now, why is that important? You got thousands of variations of the same virus. Bingo, you can count on at least one of them to have a sequence that matches appropriately with the host, such that cellular interactions can take place between the virus and the cell. Binding needs to take place between the cell and the virus, and for that to happen, an appropriate sequence is needed to generate proteins of the correct shape. Now, this is also why a virus can transfer to a host of different species. Let's take an example from a bat to a pangolin. Let's say the bat takes a shit and the pangolin goes yum yum. There's a pool of viruses in that pile of shit. Now, this does not happen very often, but if one of those viruses, let's say, it's like very heavily mutated, the other viruses got like 5 mutations on them, this one's got like 15 entirely by a streak of luck and coincidence, and at that point you may assume that this virus may be different enough from the original that it actually has a matching sequence with the pangolin, creating proteins with a shape that can interact with an entirely different species altogether. And that is, in fact, how viruses jump between different species. Now, these viruses, they do mutate, but the thing is, at no point in this video has a virus mutation led to a transformation into a deadlier strain. The effect that the mutation has is really only to increase the survivability of the virus. In fact, if you genetically engineer a virus to prevent it from mutating, it just dies. Mutation is an inherent part of a virus's survival capability, and it does not upgrade the virus in any deadly way. Now, it is possible for a specific mutation to result in a strain that is deadlier, kills cells faster, that kind of stuff, but hear me out first, okay? You're gonna assume that natural selection is gonna happen because it is deadlier or it infects you faster, it's gonna outcompete all the other strains and yada yada yada. You know how natural selection works. But the thing is, viruses don't undergo natural selection as easily as we think so. It is more complicated than that because it has a crown on its head that says, "I'm the king of mutations, so F you, I'm not gonna follow the rules of nature." What happens is, when you got a deadly strain that infects a cell, it's no guarantee that the gene gets passed down to the viral offsprings because there's a damn high chance that the gene is going to mutate itself again. And all of a sudden, this deadly strain just vanished from thin air because it can't pass down the torch to our children like everyone else does. I have a brilliant analogy to explain this, by the way. Think about Shifter Xeris, a card from Hearthstone. Every turn it changes into a different card. So yeah, one turn you may get Deathwing, but next turn it might be a penguin. Who knows? And that's exactly how the virus works. So you shouldn't be afraid at all. And now I hope you leave this video with some valuable knowledge. Have a nice quarantine. See you next time.